Welcome you earlier. Thank you everyone for coming. As Mr. Todd said, we have 5 of our interns just coming to the end of their 3-month internship with us. And during those 3 months, they are asked to write a minimum of a 3,000 word paper. And off the back of that, they then compile a PowerPoint presentation and present their findings and the research from that paper. So that is what we will be listening to tonight, is basically their independent research paper that they've wrote. So I will not hold the floor too long. I'm going to introduce the first one now. Is that all right, Todd, or do we need to add anything else?
No, you're
all good to go?
Yep, we're all good to go. Everything is recording.
Fantastic. So I am super excited to open the show with one of our interns called Ishwari Singh, all the way from India. He is a graduate in political science from the Delhi University in India. He has a passion and research experience in the field of international relations, particularly security, strategy, and terrorism, with an aim to make a career in the field of conflict resolution and peace building. He seeks to provide concrete solutions to major security threats and promote peace and international cooperation on key security issues. I know you're all going to really enjoy his presentation. I'm going to let him introduce his title, and I'll hand it over to you, Mr. Ishwari.
Thank you so much, Stuart. Just a second. Okay, I hope you can see the screen.
Yes.
Okay, so a very good morning to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank GCTI and Todd for giving me this opportunity to present my paper. And of course, a big thanks to Stuart, who has been a constant guide throughout the internship program. And I must say that this has been a fantastic experience for me. So without further ado, I would like to present my paper on de-radicalization as a counter-terrorism strategy. So before we look into as to what is de-radicalization, it is important to understand the concept of radicalization. Radicalization means a process whereby an individual or group may develop a mindset that can raise the risk of engaging in violent extremism or terrorism. It is a complex, dynamic, and non-linear transformation in an individual's psyche that leads to a major shift in his or her worldview. Due to these changes, a person might eventually lead to take up violent measures for inflicting their views. Whereas de-radicalization, on the other hand, may be referred to the methods and techniques used to undermine and reverse the radicalization process, and hence reducing the potential threat from terrorism. De-radicalization in more general terms can be defined as a process of convincing a person not to have extreme views. Many a times, it is seen that de-radicalization is confused with the concept of disengagement, but it is important to understand that both these terms are, altogether a different concept. Disengagement occurs when an individual or group no longer participates in violent acts, whereas de-radicalization takes place when a person or a group no longer believes in a violent ideology. De-radicalization leads to the ideological change within the individual or the group, whereas disengagement means behavioral change. That is, no engagement in violence, but no change in the violent ideology of the individual. Professor John Horgan describes disengagement as in which the individual's role within the organization changes from violent participation to less active role. So now that we have understood the difference between disengagement and de-radicalization, we would look into certain de-radicalization programs of some countries, and we would start off the discussion with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia's de-radicalization approach is based on a strategy called prevention, rehabilitation, and aftercare. These are 3 distinct but interconnected programs, which are also known as PRAC. The prevention section of Saudi Arabia's strategy aims to discourage public sympathy for extremists and persuade them to abandon violence and extremist thinkings. The program begins at the school level and uses books and other pieces of literature to teach the true sense of Islam to the students. The Ministry of Education holds lectures and programs in all of the kingdom's schools to educate and warn students about the dangers of extremism, terrorism, and violence from a very early stage. Public communication is also aggressively utilized to develop narratives of moderation and counter narratives and counteract radical beliefs and propaganda. The rehabilitation strategy of Saudi Arabia is based on the Counselling Program. It is a comprehensive effort to rehabilitate and re-educate violent extremists and extremist supporters through extensive religious debates and psychological treatment. Detained security offenders are invited to engage in the rehabilitation process regardless of their specific misdeeds. After the completion of the process, those who are found to have renounced their previous views are eligible to be released from the custody. The counseling program is administered by a group called the Advisory Committee, which consists of clerics, academicians, psychologists, and social scientists. The aftercare component aims to ease inmates' reintegration into the society, as well as to ensure that they do not return to the life and philosophy of extremism and terrorism. To that aim, the program makes use of social support, ongoing counseling, access to care rehabilitation center, which provides everything from sport facilities to art therapy and round-the-clock access to the religious scholars. Detainees also have access to a variety of recreational and leisure activities because such activities are considered vital in the de-radicalization process because they inspire acceptance and develop ideals of inclusion while also building collaboration. Now, I would like to move on to the second country, which is Singapore and its de-radicalization program. So Singapore's de-radicalization program was known as Religious Rehabilitation Group, or RRG. It used to provide religious counseling to the detainees. Three subgroups made up the RRG. The first group was known as the Secretariat Group, which made up 6 volunteers from various Islamic organizations that assisted the RRG with administrative tasks and developed materials to challenge the extremist ideology of the detainees from Jemaah Islamiyah. The resource panel was the second group, consisting of a judge, a government Islamic scholar, and 3 independent Islamic scholars who were tasked with evaluating the documents supplied by the Secretariat Group. The Rehabilitation Council panel, the third group, was made up of about 20 religious counselors who gave counseling to inmates, former detainees, and of course to the detainees' families. There were 4 stages to re-education in Singapore's de-radicalization program. The counselor identifies the detainees' views and misunderstanding of certain Islamic concepts in the first phase of the program. The counselor then refutes any inaccurate beliefs in the second phase. Third, the counselor corrects any misunderstanding by explaining the concepts correctly. Finally, the detainees taught the correct Islamic knowledge by the counselor. Now, we would look into the de-radicalization program of Denmark. So the Danish de-radicalization model is popularly known as Aarhus model. It comprises of programs for both early prevention and exit process. The prevention program aims to prevent further violent radicalization of young people who do not yet pose a threat or security problem, but who could become dangerous if their radicalization continues to progress in a violent direction. The exit program is aimed at persons who have already become radicalized and are planning or are capable of committing politically or religiously motivated violent crimes and terrorism. The Aarhus model has certain specific elements. The first element is the info house. The parents, teachers, outreach workers, social workers, and the police are frequently the first one to learn about someone who's on the verge of becoming a violent extremist. The information is given to the info house, which is staffed by East Youthland Police. The info house will make contact with the person to inform them about the reports and assessment, as well as the worries about the risky developmental trajectories and mindset. Furthermore, members of the person's network, like their family, their friends, will be mobilized in the process of assisting the person to recognize and seek alternative legal ways to find answers to life's questions. The second element is of mentoring. The Aarhus team consists of 10 well-educated mentors. The mentors are selected based on their age, gender, ethnic background, education, first-hand knowledge of various cultural and social environments, as well as political religious knowledge to form a broadly composed group capable of meeting the often diverse and individual profiles and specific needs of the targeted person. The third and final element of the RS model is the exit program. The exit program for foreign fighters was initiated in 2030, aimed at de-radicalization, the homecoming of foreign fighters, which has been a challenge in the European continent. The exit program's goal is to assist men and women who want to leave violent pathways behind and reintegrate into society and participate in daily social activities. If an exit program is considered possible, the case is forwarded to a task team, which will determine which specific services should be provided to the homecoming individual, as well as resource persons in his or her social network. Following that, a written process cooperation agreement is drafted in collaboration with homecoming person, who will be offered assistance in the areas of employment, education, housing, psychological and counseling therapy, medical care, to complete the exit process and reintegrate them back into the society. Now that we have looked into 3 different de-radicalization models, I would now like to analyze these 3 de-radicalization model as a whole. Saudi Arabia's de-radicalization program is considered to be the most successful de-radicalization program. Sheikh Al Saldan, a member of the Counselling Program, announced that 90% of its participants had renounced their radical views, and about 1,500 of 3,200 prisoners involved in the program had been released. Saudi Arabia's de-radicalization program is the most comprehensive program in the world. Never before has a state implemented so many distinct programs at the same time in such a detailed manner. However, it may be hard to replicate in other smaller countries given the high financial cost which is incurred while executing the program. Saudi Arabia, being a rentier economy, can afford these costs, but countries like Somalia, Algeria, or any other nation in Africa, like Nigeria, which are suffering from terrorism, cannot afford these costs. Furthermore, Western countries, which are economically powerful, may still find the replication of this program difficult. Both Saudi Arabia and Singapore, which is also considered a successful program, both these countries relied on religious clerics for the counseling and de-radicalization for the counseling. But this makes it especially noteworthy that many rehabilitated jihadist leaders are now working for de-radicalization programs in Saudi Arabia. The program would hence be difficult to replicate in secular Western countries where security services would most likely be unable to command the same legitimacy among the devout Muslims as the Islamic Saudi Arabian government. The RS model of Denmark is also largely regarded as successful. This claim is based on the account that in 2013, around 30 people were known to have joined the extremist groups abroad, where only 1 person has been reported in 2014, and only 3 have been reported to have joined ISIS in Syria in the year 2015. However, the RS model can operate because of high level of recorded trust between national government structures and the Danish citizen, which may be lacking in other states. Studies have shown that overall trust in civilian institutions such as the parliament, public administration, the police, and the court is comparatively strong in Denmark, and it is on the rise, which is reversing a negative trend in the most other European countries over the last 10 years. So based on the analysis of these 3 countries, it can be argued that there are certain conditions and circumstances required for a state to make the de-radicalization program a successful one. Firstly, a country should be economically powerful and willing to spend on de-radicalization program. Secondly, the program should be individually tailored and must use reform formal radicals to present counter narratives to extremist thinking, as well as educational and vocational training to help with reform and reintegration. Thirdly, a radical emotional and pragmatic attachment to the group must also be broken as a part of de-radicalization effort. To undercut effective attachment to a radical group, a program must offer emotional support and assist the individual in finding friends who are de-radicalized. Fourthly, the de-radicalization program should consist of robust aftercare program and provide alternative source of income, such as, and also housing, healthcare, education to the individual and its family, and should also monitor individuals based on different threat levels. Finally, for the de-radicalization program to be successful, it is important that there is a high level of trust between the people and the government, as lack of trust can lead to suspicion among the general population and can decrease the overall impact of the program. If all these conditions are met, then I believe a de-radicalization program can be very effective counter-terrorism strategy. Thank you so much.
Wow, fantastic. Can you just stop sharing your screen,
yes.
Ishwari, so I can see everyone? Fantastic, thank you, sir. Okay, thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation on de-radicalization as a counter-terrorism strategy. I'm going to open it to the floor. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Ishwari on his presentation? Any questions that you could think of about the subject that he's spoke about?
Very good job, Ishwari.
Thank you.
Okay, well, while you're thinking, I have a question, actually. You mentioned that it would be potentially hard to replicate.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just stop sharing your screen, whoever that was? Thank you. You said it would be hard to replicate a de-radicalized program such as Saudi Arabia in secular Western countries. Mm-hmm. For several reasons. What do you think then is the strategy that these Western countries can take if they can't replicate that particular strategy that Saudi are having such a good statistic with?
So, as I said at the ending part, that there are certain conditions which are required, for a Western country as well, it is considered that Western countries are economically powerful and they would be willing to spend on the de-radicalization program. So the first condition is met. But the second condition is very important, that the program should have to be individually tailored, which was in the case of Saudi Arabia and also in the case of Singapore. And they relied on reformed radicals and the terrorists, for the counseling part. So which is found difficult in the Western countries. So Western countries will have to be, a little lenient in terms of their how they handle the terrorists, and they should use them for the de-radicalization efforts, because all other four reasons are found in the Western countries. They are sufficient for them, but the only drawback which they have is the fact that they don't rely on the reformed radicals for the de-radicalization process. And if they do rely on them, it can be an effective strategy for the Western countries as well.
Fantastic, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? There must be.
I do, actually.
Yeah.
So Indonesia has probably one of the best de-radicalization programs currently, with a group that the government has put together of Muslim people who scan and review all material that is published within the country. Do you think it's a good idea that the government get involved and put together a group like that? You said that in treatment programs, it's good to build trust, to have previous terrorists that are rehabilitated to help with these programs. Why? Because there's a better understanding like that. But as far as talking and knowing the material, the literature, anything that's published, should that not be scrutinized too by a group within the community, so that there is no material that's being pushed through? Currently, we have been working on a project in the background where we're finding new material that's coming out promoting recruitment in Southeast Asia. And so do you honestly think that each government should set up that working group that can facilitate looking through the material that the community is publishing to its members?
Absolutely, this can be a good strategy as well. But in Indonesia, we can find that there is a recorded level of trust between the people and as to what the government is doing.
Right.
So if that is the case, if in the Western countries, say for example in US, people have trust within the government that they would be scanning their the papers or what is being published in the community, and they have the trust that the government would be using it for good purposes, then the strategy might work. But if there is no trust between the government and its people, then, people might, raise question as to why the government is, scanning all these papers and stuff.
Thank you.
Answer. Anybody else before we move on?
Yeah.
Yes.
Kind of on the back of what was just said, sorry, because I missed sound then. So who's setting the benchmark? How do we know that it's what somebody else is calling a de-radicalization program is what we set the benchmark or the infrastructure or the framework to call it that? So how do we know that the program in Saudi Arabia, the same with the Dutch, the same with whichever country, how are they all talking to each other or not, as the case may be? How do we know that that's not something that can't be infiltrated, changed, adjusted, turned into something more insidious with not so much de-radicalization or just a different form of radicalization?
Right.
Or has that already been sort of answered?
So what do you mean? Like, are you asking that can these de-radicalization programs be infiltrated? Are you asking that?
Partially, but I guess I'm saying because you said the success rate was so high in, say, Saudi, with the program that they've formed. Do we know what the differences are between how that's managed and what the program sort of involves versus the success rate or the structure in a more westernized? Yeah. Because you said about the huge involvement between people of faiths, whatever sort of leaders in that area to be quite actively involved in the de-radicalization program itself. So, how do we know that they're running the same thing? Or is there a common theme that ties? Is there a governing body? Is there a policy? Is there a that makes all of them conjoined with the goal or the same sort of? So sorry, I can't get my words out.
So what I'm able to understand, you're basically saying that how can we find out that all these three countries have the same goal, right?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. So for that, there are, so many differences in the field of terrorism within the academia, we need a common definition of de-radicalization, but, we don't have a common definition for terrorism itself. There's no universal definition for terrorism. So, it is difficult for us, to have a universal definition for de-radicalization or radicalization because, in terrorism, we generally say that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. But we do still have, counter-terrorism strategies. So de-radicalization is also one such strategies, but having a universal definition for the program would be difficult, because we still don't have a universal definition for terrorism.
So basically, we're kind of relying on the fact that people, that the program is quite fluid, but I guess everyone shares information or doesn't, as the case may be, and it's more tailored to perhaps the problems at the time within their specific regions or areas, rather than a collaborative working program of de-radicalization, as an umbrella term that has joint interests.
Yeah.
So,
and it also, yes, Tom.
So personally, I've seen that different programs in different area have different strategies because there's not a one-size-fits-all program. And that's what they've done in the past, is they tried that initially of a one-size-fits-all program, and it just doesn't work. Just like any treatment program, you have to do individual care for that person because everyone's circumstances are different. They measure recidivism by what happens. Look what happened with the knife attack in London Bridge. That guy was just released. He went through a de-radicalization program and he committed another crime. So in the background, it takes a lot of follow-up support. What they do in Indonesia is once the person is through the program, you just don't graduate. You're followed throughout time. you're placed into community probation. People are watching you, and it's more successful to find out what the underlying issues are with the person, because sometimes they're just mental health issues. Sometimes they are radicalization because of religion. And so if you've talked to people that have been de-radicalized, they'll tell you that their belief structure has changed because, they were influenced in the wrong way in the beginning. That's what we've seen from the program in Indonesia in all the metrics they're using, which are follow-up care. You can't just graduate. You have to make sure that the mindset of the individual is back on track and they're productive members of society. And so hopefully that answered the question, because there's a follow-up study that they're doing now. We discuss with Indonesia their program with consultants sometimes, and we're able to see the results. We should have that study available in the future. If you're interested, we'll publish it here at GCTI.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much.
Sure.
Ishwari, thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation. Again, well done. I hope that's everyone. If you do have any more questions that you think on throughout the webinar, just post them in the chat box, and I'm sure Ishwari will answer them there. But okay, so we will move swiftly on to our next intern. Oh, who's sharing screens? Miss Madison.
No, it's me trying to share my screen.
All right, there you are. Right, okay. So
let us introduce you first. Let us introduce you first, Miss Charlotte.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
So we have Miss Charlotte as our second speaker of the day. Now, Charlotte is studying a Master of Criminology at the University of Sydney after graduating with a Bachelor of Criminology and Criminal Justice from Griffith University in Queensland. Her research interests include criminology, terrorism, cybersecurity, and violent extremism. During the pandemic in 2020, she volunteered and participated in challenges associated with Trace Labs, Australian Federal Police, Toronto Police, AustCyber, and the National Missing Persons Coordination Centre to assist law enforcement with new leads and intelligence to find missing persons. Working in global diverse teams virtually, many of the missing persons were cold cases. Charlotte represented the Sydney Law School in the Cyber 912 Strategy Challenge Canberra in 2019, and she also represented the law school in a prestigious international competition in the Law Without Walls program 2021. So I will let Charlotte introduce her title, and off you go. Good luck.
Sorry, I just have to sit up. No one can hear my dog in the background, can they? There's two of them.
You must see the wolf on the screen. That's why he's barking.
God, please. Sorry.
Looks like you're in notes mode. There you go.
Right. Okay. Oops. Right. Okay. Here we go. Good morning from Australia. My presentation will be based on my research paper. I'm sorry, guys. I'm had a bit of a problem. Okay.
We can see your screen.
Can you? Okay.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with my computer. Sorry, I have to do 2 seconds. I have to do it the way it is. Okay.
What's the issue?
Research, oh, there's something wrong with my computer. It's okay. I'm trying to put myself on speaker mode, and my computer's not letting me do it. I don't know why.
Okay.
Can you see me?
We can see,
now?
We can see the screen.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you see me as well?
Yes.
Oh, you can, because I can't see myself. That's okay, as long as you can see me.
Yep.
Okay, sorry, here we go. Right from the beginning. Right. Good morning, everyone from Australia. My presentation will be based on my research paper on lone wolf terrorism on the internet. My question is, what is lone wolf terrorism and how do lone wolves use the internet to promote their ideology? Since 2021, ASIO has changed the terminology of terrorism and to religiously motivated acts of violent extremism and also ideological motivated acts of violent extremism. ASIO's statement in 2021 is, the most likely attack in Australia would be that of a lone actor, someone who immobilizes to violence with little or no warning. The threat to Australia is probable. Lone wolf terrorism can be classified as solo actor terrorism, freelance terrorism, leaderless, and a jihadi. The jihadi wolf concept will be discussed as well as other typologies of lone wolves. Perpetrators are seen to commit lone wolf terrorist acts and also are referred to lone wolves who engage in terrorist attacks without affiliation to a network or organized terrorist group. The lone wolves are not directed by any outside influence or hierarchy, using their own MO to carry out attacks. Lone wolves and terrorist groups may identify with a common ideology and motivation. Lone wolves have the propensity to sympathize with an extremist movement, but are not part of the movement. Lone wolves act alone, indirectly supported by individuals that incite encouragement, inspiration, and implementation of the deed, directly supported by individuals in the preparation stage. These individuals, mentors, and other lone wolves, terrorists, or persons that share similar ideologies on the internet, and also violent extremists, such as the white supremacist or Islamic groups that assist with instructions. The concept of the lone wolf terrorist can be also seen as the jihadi wolf. Removal of the lone label, signifying that jihadi wolf is not alone nor weak, as lone suggests isolation of the lone wolf as an outsider. The jihadi wolf is cultural and cyber globalized in the arena of Islamic terrorist narratives that facilitate lone jihad against the West. He is fully engaged in a mobile internet connected and interacting in a cyber socialization of the jihadi sphere, the terrorist infosphere, as Intonori suggests. So there is a connection of the internet to the jihadi wolf or the lone wolf terrorist, and also the ideology has evolved to create pathways and a connection to facilitate lone wolf terrorism. The lone wolf has an ideology that he carves into shape according to his own personal grievances. The lone wolf connects with his environment on 3 levels. Media contacts, online chats, group forums on extremist platforms, websites, and conspiracy theories found on the internet. 2, connections, extremist organizations and individuals of similar beliefs. 3, through society's trends and opinions regarding ideological conditioned sympathies. Scholars have sought to create lone wolf typologies to understand lone wolf terrorism and examine triggers and the turning point in what circumstances lead individuals to violent extremism. Typologies suggested are secular, single issue, criminal, and idiosyncratic. Religious lone wolves act on religious beliefs. Secular lone wolves act on ethno-nationalist political causes. The idiosyncratic lone wolf acts on the cause, and the white supremacist lone wolf act for a specific cause. There's no set profiles of lone wolf terrorism, and it can be seen to be categorized at the moment by their religious and ideological beliefs. But there are further analysis where they can be categorized as chaos or career lone wolves. The chaos lone wolf is linked to a single event, a planned execution with maximum casualties and also public visibility. For example, suicide bombing or the impact of massacre, such as the Oslo bombing and the Utøya massacre shooting by Anders Breivik, the Norwegian lone wolf terrorist in 2011. The career serial lone wolf is linked to acts of terrorism over a long time, such as the Unibomber. There was also further analysis of two types of lone wolves, risk-seeking and risk-aversive. The risk-aversive engages in activism and low levels of terrorism. The risk-seeking lone wolf focuses on risk of exposure, and the capture is as significant of importance, equal to or more than the cause. The jihadi wolf represents the evolution of Islamic extremism as the jihadi sphere has evolved from traditional terrorism with evolution of the internet, with cyberspace and expansion of the interactive power using mobile devices. The cyber environment represents the living core of the culture of terrorism and promotes a more appealing, persuasive, seductive power of the jihad identity. The cyber environment also is more influential in the impact on the younger generation, the next potential generation of lone wolves, Generation T. These potential lone wolves or jihadi wolf has been groomed by specific narratives motivated and incited to attack the West. Individuals seen as a jihadi wolf are continually mobile connected, and cyber jihadi inspired lone actors ready to attack with minimal strategic planning using their own do-it-yourself MO. Terrorist groups have utilized the internet for online campaigns to promote lone jihad with visual narratives and storytelling to commemorate the jihadi wolf as a virilized weapon in masculinity in the evolution of terrorism. My paper also focused on the concept of online radicalization, a process whereby individuals through their online interactions and exposures to various types of the internet contexts come to view violence as a legitimate method of solving social and political conflicts. In the case of the jihadi wolf and the lone wolf phenomena, the exposure to the internet, mobile cultures, accessibility of mobile devices, there is a propensity of extremists to engage and influence vulnerable individuals that are susceptible to violence. The jihadi wolf is a vulnerable person with violent tendencies. The jihadi wolf can be radicalized by face-to-face radicalization, the environment, and also cyber radicalized by the jihadi sphere, by exposure to a cyber ecosystem involving social radicalization through the online social media platforms, underground networks, and legitimate platforms such as Facebook, Snapchat. The jihadi wolf through mobile radicalization results in social isolation in cyberspace with the propensity to a self-radicalization digital media diet. This diet created by intermediary could be creativity, literacy, and educational materials. In childhood, tools, books, and apps influence the jihadi wolf to recognize the enemy and the necessity to eradicate him. The creativity model influences the young jihadi wolf via apps, video, and comic books, and gives a collective identity, a jihadist visual identity, and the gamification dynamics to produce deviant activation of violence. There are access also to violent narratives that alleviate foreign terrorist fighters via cyberspace that inspire the jihadi wolf. Terrorist groups, their narratives in the digital world depicting terrorism has become so seductive to the jihadi wolf. Violence is seen as an ancestral drive. This influences the jihadi wolf driven by destructive creativity on social media platforms. It can be argued that the terrorist culture is nurturing Generation T with the use of mobile devices, instant messaging, and turning the device into a terrorist essential weapon. Also to study the rules of the lone jihad and incite the do-it-yourself MO operation attack. Terrorist groups have utilized cyberspace by adapting and using mobile technology to entice the young generation T to spread their ideology, commit violent attacks, be killing machines with the ease of tech, using online apps to communicate through encrypted channels. Now we come to the Christchurch shooter, who is an example of the lone wolf. In March 2019, Tarrant, with no previous criminal history, was active on social media platforms that promoted online violent extremism. He invaded the Al Noor Mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand, and shot dead 42 worshippers. On his way to the mosque, he continued his attacks on the Muslim community. Footage was live streamed as he continued the massacre through a body cam attached to his helmet using GoPro footage, live streamed to Facebook as he chatted to followers. He used a range of guns, and within 36 minutes, a death toll of 51. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, with 21 charges of murder, engaging in a terrorist attack, 40 charges of attempted murder. Now, Tarrant uploaded his manifesto, The Great Replacement, to extremist websites such as 8chan, minutes before the attacks. His manifesto outlined his ideology, which was white supremacism. It was also a training manual for followers, coded and encrypted. And also it was a manual that was designed to make explosive devices and modify and acquire weapons, and how to plan an attack for his followers. He gamified the violence using the GoPro camera and turned his acts of terrorism into a video game. The attacks increased anti-Muslim hate online. Tarrant's message was to incite violence and prevent white genocide from immigrants. His actions and online activity, graphic footage of attacks, manifesto, his MO inspired other extremists, for example, the Hull attacks. The perpetrator tried to copy his MO, upload manifestos, and using a smartphone to live stream via Twitch, but he was unsuccessful. Now, the extreme violence in the Christchurch massacre can also be interpreted as a righteously enraged slaughter by the lone wolf. The lone wolf interprets victims he's attacking, what he regards as an internal human value to defend. He also must undergo a particularly emotional process to turn it into a rage. The lone wolf must successfully organize his behavior relating to his perspective and emotional posture whilst engaged in violence. Death then can be seen as a sacrificial slaughter. This is some perspective from cats, although this perspective is highly hypothetical and does not endorse this type of violence. Lone wolf terrorism can influence others to commit violent acts of extremism by their online presence on online digital platforms. Using their MO, memes, live streaming of violence by tech can seduce vulnerable individuals to become a lone wolf. The lone wolf is never truly alone. He needs cyberspace to connect and carry out his ideology and acts of violent extremism. As Sparrow asserts, the lone wolf is a young man who emerges from the shadows, gun in hand, already committed to an evil ideology. He further warns he's out there in the world somewhere, browsing a racist internet forum, and counting ammunition. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. So we will open up. Can you? Yeah, perfect. We'll open up to the floor for any questions for Miss Charlotte.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
What role do you think platforms like Twitter or Facebook or any of the social media platforms you decide to focus on have in that radicalization process of those lone wolves?
Basically, they don't take, obviously, responsibility of what's happening with terrorism because it's so accessible to everyone. It's very hard for them to actually stop something, especially a lone wolf that acts on their own with normally no warning at all. For example, as I said to you, the Christchurch massacre was one of the highest examples. The first person to live stream, within minutes, his really atrocious massacre. So there are groups that try to monitor the platform. There's no government really that's actually, at the moment introduced it into proper cyber law, but there's a group called Tech Against Terrorism and also some other groups that are trying to work with different countries where they use algorithms, and the algorithms show on the internet different buzzwords and activity from certain individuals. So this is working at the moment, and it's called the Christchurch Call. And I'm not sure which countries. I could roll them off, but I can't remember at the moment because it's about 5 a.m. But that's one of the ways they're actually trying to, watch these people, because these people are not visible to people at the moment. And as my last quote said, he's out there. We don't know who he is, counting ammunition or guns or bombs. And then that's the danger. And that's the danger that Australia sees at the moment, but also the rest of the world. He's not Islam, he's not from Islam now. He could also be a white person, so it's called white domestic terrorism in my eyes. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, you did great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Miss Madison, do you have your hand raised?
Yes, sir. Thank you. First of all, great presentation. I greatly enjoyed it. I was actually going to ask your opinion and ask, what measures do you think should be put in place to stem really the lone wolf terrorism that we see an increase in?
Yeah, well, as I said, the Tech Against Terrorism is a group of countries who are trying to, they're not just the only organization, but they're the most one that has a higher profile. They are trying to activate, the monitoring of these platforms. Unfortunately, the platforms themselves don't take any responsibility. And also because the internet is sort of evolving so quickly, the terrorists are evolving maybe quicker than laws. And it's very hard to police, like any activity on the internet, because, platforms like Facebook sort of don't really monitor, as well as they should, and they won't take any responsibility. And also there's the problem, these people use underground networks, which are encrypted, like for Telegram, for example, in Signal. In Australia, when we had the riots, there was a message that went out through Signal that no one else knew until it was too late, where they were in Sydney, especially. They were actually, sort of protesting against, obviously the lockdown laws, mask wearing, mandatory vaccination, and it got quite violent, and especially violent in Victoria. So they're sort of also becoming what the government, or shall I say, the authorities are thinking is another type of violent extremism that they've got to try and stem. But how do they do it unless someone goes on the internet, like law enforcement, and infiltrates them, which they have done. They do try to do it and become one of them and pretend and try and work out what their next, what they're going to do next, really. So it's really hard to try and, police that sort of behavior, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Awesome. Right, if there is any further questions for Miss Charlotte, please pop them in the chat box and I'm sure she will be happy to answer them there. So, yeah. So let's move swiftly on to our next presenter, Mr. Aravindan. I'm just going to make sure he is with us and
yes,
online.
Yes,
there he is. There he is. Hello, sir. So could it just a gentle reminder, could you please mute your mics as well, everyone else? So Mr. Aravindan is, again, one of our current interns. He's a forensic science graduate pursuing post-graduation in Homeland Security from National Forensic Sciences University. He's ambitious to enhance expertise in security studies and interested in subjects such as geopolitics, intelligence studies, violent extremism. He's also keen to learn and understand people and societies around the globe. So I will, without further ado, pass the floor over to Mr. Aravindan to share your screen, introduce your title, and deliver your presentation. Good luck.
I hope my presentation is visible to all.
Yeah, we can see your screen, just nice and clear, nice and steady and slow, and off you go.
Okay, good morning. I am Aravindan. I am an intern at Global Counter-Terrorism Institute. Here I will be presenting on the topic, the growth of Boko Haram and the political and economic situation in Nigeria. Nigeria has been a major focal point in the global terrorism arena throughout the last decade. The rapid growth of Boko Haram, a terrorist group in Nigeria, from a small religious study group to the world's most dangerous terrorist group in 2015, is really a subject of interest in the terrorism studies. Boko Haram, or Jama'atu Ahli Sunnah Litawadi wal Jihad, means the people of Sunnah committed to the propagation of Prophet's teachings and jihad. They actually aims to overthrow the current Nigerian government and replace it with an Islamic political system based on Sharia law. The origin of Boko Haram could be related to several foreign movements and ideologies, along with the domestic situations. The Algerian civil unrest, the Afghan Soviet war, the Salafi movement, Iranian revolution were some of them, from which made the Muhammad Yusuf and several other leaders of the Boko Haram to develop a movement against the secular and democratic government in Nigeria. The group under Yusuf was initially a small group of students who he used to teach as the mosque. Their argument was that the Western culture is being forced on the local Islamic society by the state authorities through the educational and political means. He succeeded in making his followers to believe that the existing political system, along with the Western education, is the cause of all issues faced by the Muslims in Nigeria. He successfully raised the religious insecurity feelings, and the support came from all sections due to their Islamic way of solution to the current political pattern. They at several times also called themselves as Sunnah to attract more followers from the sect. The number of followers grew in large numbers throughout the northern states of Nigeria, where most of them were the students and unemployed educated youth who never had a sustainable job to find for a livelihood. Following the 9/11 attacks, the Nigerian forces cracked down on the group because of some of its assertive actions, killing most of its leaders. This led to the emergence of Yusuf as a single leader figure in the group. He attracted a lot of followers through his pro-Islamic ideas and preachings. He developed support from political and business elites throughout the country. And initially, they only carried out targeted attacks against the individuals who opposed the group, because Yusuf never intended to make a terror group, as it is not, it will not get them a legitimacy from the public. What made the success of Boko Haram, even from the beginning, was because the large part of community was unsatisfied with the approach of its political leaders in solving major issues faced by them. When Boko Haram and Yusuf approached them with a hopeful alternative, they started following them in large numbers. But this period never lasted for a long. The political leadership went hard on the group in 2009, and a mass bloodshed occurred between the security forces and Boko Haram, killing Muhammad Yusuf himself along with hundreds of its followers. The remaining members of the group escaped to the neighboring countries. Some of them gained training and returned to Nigeria to avenge this incident. Under the new leadership of Abu Bakr Shekau, after 2010, the group reconstituted itself and began a full-scale insurgency against the state. The extrajudicial killing of Boko Haram leader Muhammad Yusuf and the unjustifiable actions of using brutal force by the security force could be regarded as a big mistake of authorities during that time. This raised more sympathy of the Islamic society towards the group and attracted large number of recruits. Shekau was a leader with more aggressive nature who tried to tie the group with other foreign terrorist giants, firstly with Al-Qaeda and then with the Islamic State. These groups also found it as an opportunity to make their presence in the African region. First, they inclined towards Al-Qaeda publicly. This is because they got trainings and other resources from the Al-Qaeda affiliates in the African neighborhood. They carried out new methods of suicide bombing, assassination campaigns against both civilians and security forces. But due to their own internal issues, the relation with Al-Qaeda never lasted for long. In 2015, they pledged alliance to Islamic State, changing its name as Islamic State West Africa Province. But some of the approaches of Shekau forced ISIS leadership to replace him with Yusuf's son, Abu Musab al-Barnawi, as the group new head. The ISIS leadership never accepted Shekau's use of women and children in the terrorist activities, where he also never discriminated on attacking the civilians, whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims or whatever their background or whatever it is. This resulted in an internal split in the group, where one faction went with Shekau and other remained under Barnawi. Both groups followed different strategies and ideas to fight against the state, and also they continued to fight within themselves to gain control over one another's region or to control the entire area. The whole insurgency from 2010 resulted in the loss of thousands of human lives and displaced a million of others. The reason behind the growth of Boko Haram includes different factors, most of which are political and governance related. Like most of the other modern nation states, the political leadership in Nigeria never paid larger attention in nation's development, but just to win elections and to become as rich as possible. Because of the looting of public funds by corrupt political elites and their cadres, 4 decades of military leadership and the dysfunctional civilian government made a terrible impact on the state-citizen relationship. The unequal distribution of economic and state resources has its part in emergence of Boko Haram. Poverty, illiteracy, unemployment, and whatever the economic poor situation in Nigeria made the Boko Haram insurgency highly feasible. The northern Nigeria, since the rule of military leadership, has been the victims of religious conflicts and marginalization. The unemployed youth, frustrated with the situation, which when connected with the religious identity in marginalization, became easy targets of recruiting to Boko Haram. The youth in large numbers found Boko Haram as a weapon to fight against the existing political system because they had no other better alternatives. The speeches of Boko, Yusuf and Sheikh were clear to solve most of the issues faced by the Islamic society at that time. Large number of youth became radicalized through these ideas of better future under an Islamic state. The political drift between the federal and state governing parties were also a reason. Both continuously criticized one another's failure to contain the violence, which caused no good at all. The state put responsibility on the federal government and the federal government put it on the state. As the mass support from the people during elections became more dependent on the religious identities, the developmental issues of the nation became less important for the political parties to stay in power. The political elites at many times created sectarian feelings to secure bloc support from the particular groups in most part of the country. This became more useful for Boko Haram than these parties who started it. They raised identity feelings and support from political parties because of the identity lines at many times helped Boko Haram in gaining political and social significance in the region. The leadership also failed in controlling the violence of the group because of less resources provided to the security forces. When coming to the economic impact of the insurgency, the oil and agriculture industries are the most important sectors which contributed mostly to the economy and revenue of the nation. Both the industries were hugely affected by the insurgency in the past decade. The Boko Haram insurgency had affected the agriculture industry a lot. The number of targeted farmer killings has been a serious issue. The attack on farmers was mainly due to the suspicion that they were the ones who spy on the activities and location of militants and inform it to the military. The killing of farmers and forced closure of local markets affected not only the economy and food security of Nigeria, but also the neighboring countries such as Cameroon. The group never let the state to explore oil-rich areas of the north and also attract the ongoing mining operations in that region. The transportation facilities and experts of the oil industry were continuously attacked, causing them to shut down the whole industry in that region. The insurgency also had a direct impact on the budget allocations as the counter-insurgency needs of the security agencies required huge funds. From the total budget allocation, the highest share went to the defense and security, causing all other social development sectors getting less funds. Even though the situation was such, the security forces remained ill-equipped to face the insurgency due to the corruption prevailed in the defense sector. To conclude the presentation, the growth and success of the Boko Haram has been majorly influenced by the Nigeria's internal situation itself, particularly the political factors. The social and ethnic differences in the Nigeria has been mishandled and misused by the political elites in the country since her independence. They have never tried to solve the backward feeling of Muslim population in the north, but used them as such for their political gains through marginalized identity feelings. The emergence and growth of Boko Haram was a result of such mishandling by the decision makers. Boko Haram was successful in interpreting these issues as a result of Western pattern and stating an Islamic alternatives to solve these issues. The Islamic societies slowly started believing these ideas to fight against the state. This was the reason why the outfit grew in such large capacity, while the whole state and its authorities failed to contain it at all stages whenever they tried to do so. The Islamic State affiliated Boko Haram sect called Islamic State West Africa Province continues to possess pose a threat to the regional stability, to social and economic disruption they caused with the direct help of ISIS. They relies on the ideology of only targeting the state forces and carrying out services to the public. This makes them more stronger in terms of public support, and thus they are expected to grow further with the support from the public in future. To resolve this insurgency, more than only military means, it is necessary for the leadership of Nigeria to become more trustworthy and effective. The basic developmental needs of the society, especially regarding the youth, are to be satisfied without any ethnic or geographical differences. They have to make a coordinated, all-phase counter-insurgency plan, mostly focusing on the developmental issues to contain the ongoing situation. Thank you.
Thank you for a good presentation. I will open it to the floor for any questions on Boko Haram or anything surrounding the topic he's just spoken about.
Yes, I have a question. So, Mr. Aravindan, that's how you say it, Aravindan. I'm trying to say his name correctly.
Aravindan.
Yeah. So, what I've seen, great presentation. Do you believe that it is more ethnic cleansing and tribal warfare in the northern Nigeria, with the amount of foreign terrorist fighters coming in from other areas, meaning Boko Haram was destroyed in 2012 for the most part. And then as soon as the last president left office and the new president, Buhari, took office, here we see Boko Haram coming back again and more ethnic cleansing happening, meaning the tribal warfare is more of an issue in Nigeria than, and yes, they're using terrorism, but at the same time, everything that we have seen indicates all the attacks are on Christian churches in Nigeria versus, well, it's truly a religious and ethnic cleansing that's going on. Is that correct, based on what I've seen? And the fact that there is no economy in that area. And so, I mean, the only thing to do is to keep the person in power there who can continue to fund what's going on, according to news reports in Nigeria. Is that correct?
Yes, it is true to a greater extent, because after when the Boko Haram as a group was totally oppressed, or they were being targeted, or they were destroyed a lot of in 2010. The group have evolved a lot. They gained training, and they adapted a lot of strategies and ideas from the foreign terrorist organizations.
Yep.
And they targeted mainly on the Christian or the Western institutions in that region. They had even targeted the UN headquarters in Abuja, and the main focus of them were the Christian institutions such as churches, the schools, and other institutions. And the main thing they want to showcase to the whole public is that they doesn't want a Christian or any non-Islamic system in the northern Nigeria. They want to say that whatever the Western or the Christian system in the Nigeria at present is trying to make the whole region into a westernized one, and to totally change whatever Islamic is present in that region.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aravindan. Good answer. Anybody else? No.
Just a quickie.
Yeah.
So jumping on the back of what Todd was just saying, so is it likely that Boko Haram is going to gain any sort of relevant traction apart from what it's already doing with the displacement of millions of people and the sort of brutality, which almost seems counterproductive anyway if they're original reasoning was sort of for the political advancement of the country, or to sort of have more of a stronghold in that sense. Because it just seems kind of counterproductive that it's just more this brutal attack and, to use previous words, sort of ethnic cleansing and everything else. Do you think there's a long-term idea of actually heading towards, a full takeover or infrastructure of the entire political sphere, or in terms of running that area, or it's just to cause as much disruption as possible in a very aggressive sense? Does that make sense?
Okay, are you asking that the Boko Haram is going to cause more harms in terms of the ethnic cleansing and all in the future? Or?
No, I think what she's saying, Aravindan, is that, do you think that they will continue to grow and almost replicate what the Taliban has done in Afghanistan, and become like the political leadership of the north of the country, for example? Do you think that they're just going to continue to grow and grow until they take hold, or do you think not?
Or do they even have the capabilities? Is there any sort of evidence to suggest that? Or are they just another sort of fraction, albeit, a large one that's gained traction in the sense of just pure violence, displacement and everything else? Or do you think they actually have the wherewithal to progress, as you just said?
Good question.
According to the present situation, the leadership of the Boko Haram have also evolved. The present leadership under the Bernawi, or under the direct involvement of ISIS leadership, they have more changed into a public-friendly manner, where they are also carrying out social developmental projects like financial aids, medical support and all, along with continuing their attacks against the security forces. So
so it's more structured and more intelligence-led.
They are going to grow a lot in the future. Because even the political leadership of the North was also never taken a stable step towards Boko Haram.
Correct.
When they find Boko Haram is more supportive or helpful to their own causes, they at several times supported Boko Haram for their own growth, and which resulted in Boko Haram's growth also. So there are more chances of Boko Haram being grown to grow more in the future.
Cool. And so also as well, there, as you said in the beginning, their sort of involvement in the beginnings with Al-Qaeda and trying to sort of join forces. There's no sort of current evidence, again, to suggest currently that they're willing to sort of merge or form a superpower in that sense to join forces. They're just still a standalone unit, so to speak.
Currently, the faction under Bernawi is a Islamic State affiliate. Their name as such is Islamic State West Africa Province. The other section under the Shekau has destroyed, and Shekau was killed before 2-3 months ago. So the whole Boko Haram group members in the Nigeria is now affiliated to Islamic State, or the Islamic State West Africa Province in the region. So they are related to, or they are under the Islamic State whole leadership in the global level.
Yeah, no, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Great answer.
The goal of terrorism is to promote fear. And what we see more of is mass migration from people that are afraid to stay in those areas. And they're moving into other countries, crossing borders. And at the same time, if the government is recognized as supporting Boko Haram, which someone just came out and stated that the government, Buhari, is currently supporting Boko Haram, that's going to create a lot more tension in the country. As far as we're concerned, the U.S. has even placed an embargo on all weapons that are leading into Nigeria right now. So they're not even selling any equipment because they're afraid of that equipment falling into the hands of Boko Haram. Just FYI.
Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your questions. If there are any more, please pop them in the chat box, and I'm sure Mr. Aravindan will be happy to chat with you there.
Great presentation.
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed that, Arvindan. Thank you. We're going to move swiftly on, if that's all right with everyone. And we have Miss Gurpreet. Where are you, Miss Gurpreet? I can't see yet. There she is. Fantastic. So, Miss Gurpreet has done her Bachelor with Honours and a Master's in Gender and Literature at the National University of Singapore. And she did her PhD in Gender and Post-Colonial Literature at the University of Warwick here in the UK. She has published extensively on post-colonial ecofeminism, representation of women in films and television, and has presented her research at several international conferences. She's now in the midst of a career change and is pursuing an LLM at the SOAS, again here in the UK, specializes in human rights, conflict and justice, and she hopes to combine her passion and expertise in gender with law to work in public policy and research. And this internship at the GCTI is the beginning of this pivot in her career trajectory. So without further ado, I will pass the floor over to Miss Gurpreet, and good luck, and off you go.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Just bear with me. Right, can you see the screen?
Yep,
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So good morning, good afternoon, evening to everyone joining from all over the world. My presentation is on paradoxical rebellion, ISIS women and traditional gender ideology. So I'm going to dive right in and we take the questions later. So the role of women in wars and conflicts is not new. From struggles and revolutions for independence during colonization, witnessed even during the Arab Spring, women have always participated in such conflicts. However, the remit of security, war, and terrorism is usually seen as a male domain. It is this perception that has typically informed the international community's response on female terrorism. Although a significant number of women choose to corroborate in terrorism for sheer survival, there are others who have actively chosen to leave their homes and therefore have had agency in their decisions. For these women who have actively chosen to join terrorist groups, the question then becomes, what informs this agency? What is so appealing about an ideology that sees the reinforcement of traditional roles for women informing such an agency? And why do young women gravitate towards extremely traditional gender roles as espoused by ISIS, to the extent that they give up everything to go abroad and fight a war that is not theirs? My project is an attempt to look at the why informing the gender ideology of terrorist groups, focusing on ISIS, and will show that these foreign young women who are radicalized and leave everything and everyone in their home countries to marry ISIS men enact a paradoxical rebellion in joining a terrorist group and embracing wholeheartedly the traditional gender roles espoused by a terrorist organization such as ISIS. By embracing traditional gender roles in ISIS, these women go against acceptable norms and restrictions that they face at home, in their communities and countries. Such an action gives them an agency that they otherwise feel they do not have recourse to in their own lives. It is this agency that continues to baffle many in the fields of security and counterterrorism. It is precisely this idea that women would willingly support or act on behalf of a group that would seek to strip them of their basic human rights that has been unfathomable to the public. Again, this phenomenon is not new, but it is poorly understood. Azadeh Morvini's groundbreaking study of more than 20 young women who left their respective home countries sets the stage for piecing together the why. Her book, Guest House for Young Widows Among the Women of ISIS, pieces together first-hand accounts and information from the so-called jihadi brides themselves. Anne Speckhard and Molly Ellenberg's paper, ISIS and the Allure of Traditional Gender Roles, is the latest study to come out this year in trying to provide some sort of answers to this question of why so many women seem to find ISIS attractive. The study is unique in that it foregrounds private interviews from 259 ISIS men and women to examine the psychosocial aspects of joining, participating, and leaving ISIS, and how those aspects are informed by gender. Speckhard and Ellenberg have made no reference whatsoever to Mawvini's study and accounts of women joining ISIS, and this absence is quite strange, considering that Mawvini has painstakingly pieced together the deeper structural issues that influence the women's decision to join ISIS in the first place. Speckhard and Ellenberg state that the sheer number of women who joined ISIS was unique in contrast to previous terrorist groups, who far more often did not use females or relied on local women versus attracting them as foreign fighters. The reasons for this are several-fold, but one reason that sticks out is that ISIS declared itself as a caliphate and a state. In Benedict Anderson's Imagined Communities, Anderson defines the nation-state as an imagined political community. This is very much in line with how ISIS espoused its imaginary caliphate to be and went ahead and anchored that imagined political community to the geographical bounds of Syria and Iraq, with the ambitions to expand the physical territory of the caliphate further. It's through this establishing of themselves as a state that they had the ability to offer to women a comfortable life as a wife and mother, something that no other terrorist group before could offer. Through the online propaganda, ISIS promised a utopic state in the making that offered them better and easier lives with free housing, salaries for their husbands, a life free of discrimination, and the constraints and pressures of secular society. ISIS needed women to maintain their own state-building capacity. And in a twisted way, it rolled out what Mawvini calls a women's strategy to counter the feelings of despair of being treated like second-class citizens in their own countries, but contributing to nation building in the caliphate in a very material and tangible way, as a wife and mother producing the cubs of the caliphate. This then leads us to the push factors for women joining ISIS. One of the most commonly stated push factors that routinely comes out of the analyses of these women is traditional patriarchy. Through the Islamic State and through the gender roles of wife, mother, and a homemaker, ISIS's empowering propaganda especially appealed to women living in conservative households, where decisions were being made for them about their futures, as ISIS religiously justified and empowered them to take their futures into their own hands by deciding to travel and join ISIS. This is a crucial point to illustrate the agentic nature of these women, but what is missing from this analysis is what class these women belong to. An upper middle class Muslim woman would have different choices and recourse to the marginalization she feels in her societal context. Differential access to resources such as education, finances, employment opportunities means that class differentials are an important factor that dictate when militancy becomes an alluring option for these women. The anger that these young Muslim women felt that forms another push factor for joining ISIS is explained by three factors. Feeling isolated socially or culturally, including questioning one's identity and uncertainty of belonging within a Western culture. Feeling that the international Muslim community as a whole is being violently persecuted, and an anger or frustration over a perceived lack of international action in response to this persecution. The way in which terrorism is reported and its depiction in popular media, such as movies and television, play an important role in social perceptions and stereotypes, where the twinning of terrorist with Muslim has led to further prejudices. Stopping at such an analysis, however, would be too simplistic. The women's agency and motivations go much further than just patriarchal injunctions and conservative family norms or governments and institutions that they were rebelling against. The push factors are inextricable from the pull factors, and they feed into each other. These women's rebellion is also paradoxical in another way. These foreign women who left their home countries to join ISIS held other various roles in the caliphate too, that of recruiters, enforcers, and members of the Al-Qansah brigade who tortured locals. In these roles, the women who joined ISIS found a sense of agency and empowerment, described as heroic dominance rather than meek subservience by Aisha, a Kenyan interviewed by Speckhard and Ellenberg. Aisha gives her account as follows. Aisha remembers looking online and seeing pictures of Islamic women dressed all in black stockings and gloves and niqab, and she was holding an AK-47. She was independent. When Aisha decided to carry out a suicide mission, she was exhilarated by what she believed was a chance to act in a heroic role on behalf of Islam. From the latest interviews conducted by Marvin and Speckhardt and Ellenberg, the sense of empowerment is a powerful motivator as a pull factor. The other three factors are idealistic goals of religious duty and building a utopian caliphate state, belonging and sisterhood, adventure and romanticization of the experience. It is also important to note that by and large, researchers have found that the push and pull factors do not really differ for men and women when joining ISIS. Men have reported joining ISIS for the sense of adventure, romance, and the draw of traditional gender roles and the attraction of the hyper-masculine portrayal of ISIS, so that they're able to take on the role of being a protector and breadwinner of the family. For the purposes of organizing this paper, I have used the model of push and pull factors routinely used in such studies to explicate why women join ISIS by enacting a paradoxical rebellion, which gives them a sense of agency and empowerment. However, this model has been heavily criticized in the recent years, especially after the European Parliament's Committee on Women's Rights and Gender Equality report in 2017 on women and violent extremism. This report, and indeed other institutional bodies and general public, insist on finding one single motivation for female migration for the purpose of joining ISIS by employing strict categorizations such as push and pull factors. What Morvenese and Speckhardt and Ellenberg studies show is that there are multiple and diverse motivations for this. The women who join ISIS openly illustrate this in their interviews. One major problem to contend with is the fact that to understand and deal with problems that a group such as ISIS posed, and still poses today with the ISIS Khorasan active in Afghanistan, is that it is important to acknowledge awkward truths about how we have ended up with such violence in the first place. Deep-rooted causes, structural issues and policies have to be examined, and solutions to these need to be found. Legacies of colonization need to be dealt with, and in the present milieu, new colonialism and new imperialism as well. These legacies have had a particularized impact on women. A more inclusive and positive media representation of marginalized groups, and especially women, is also desperately needed to counter the ISIS narrative that Muslims are being globally persecuted. This also means more involvement at the local and grassroots level with a broad set of actors such as youth organizations, women's and human rights organizations, LGBTQI community, governments, actively participating in dialogue and initiatives. The coming together of these communities with a broader range of issues, what has commonly become known as intersectionality, is crucial to an informed and effective approach to counter-terrorism measures with regards to groups such as ISIS and their recruitment of women. The fact that researchers have found that the push and pull factors do not greatly differ for men and women when joining ISIS is crucial. Socially and culturally, there exists a gender bias when viewing what is or what is not acceptable for women. There are certain constructs that are deemed more acceptable for women when we think of women in those terms: caring, nurturing, amenable, self-sacrificing, among others. It therefore becomes impossible to even entertain the idea that women might find militancy and violence attractive as well. This is the reason gender mainstreaming is crucial and needs to be the cornerstone for finding solutions, where there has to be an integration of a gender equality perspective at all stages and levels of policies, programs, and projects, and assessing how it impacts both women and men. There is also a need to start thinking about counterterrorism strategies through the lens of international human rights law. The UN Security Council's Resolution 2178 was adopted by consensus on 24 September 2014, particularly with regards to foreign terrorist fighters. The resolution highlights that a complete disregard of human rights is not always helpful from a security perspective. But this, of course, is not without its own problems. Following Resolution 2178 in 2014, the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 2242 on Women, Peace and Security on 13th October 2015. Paragraphs 11, 12, and 13 of this resolution are crucial in terms of developing counterterrorism strategies that are gender sensitive. Resolution 2242, however, is soft law and not binding on states, unlike Resolution 2178, which was passed under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, and therefore is binding on states. These resolutions, however, highlight the growing consensus of late that human rights violations could be potential factors or triggers contributing to the appeal of militancy and terrorism. In particular, the denial of political rights, poverty, or social and economic marginalization has been evidence to show a link between such denial of rights and the rise in violent extremism. The promotion of human rights to countering violent extremism is in line with the UN Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy and includes the promotion of equality between men and women for the effective enjoyment of cultural, social, economic, and political rights. This improvement in gender equality is increasingly coming to be seen as the cornerstone of long-term strategies for terrorism and prevention that can be sustained in the long run. Thank you, and this is my biblio, long. Thank you.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you so much, Ms. Gurpreet. Wow, I'm going to open that to the floor. I'm sure you're going to have some intriguing questions.
I'm curious, can you go a little bit further? And you said that you were curious why Anne didn't mention anything about, what was that again? I couldn't remember actually.
It was Morvini's study. Azadeh Morvini published a book on the more than 20 actually, ISIS returnees that she interviewed in 2019. Okay. Whereas Anne Speckard and Ellenberg's paper actually came out this year. I think it was April 2021. But there's no mention of Morvini's study in that paper at all.
Oh. I think she'll be interesting because she wanted to see this presentation herself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we know Anne very well, and I think that's going to give her a challenge to add more to her paper.
It is because Morvini is actually currently at NYU, New York University. She's actually the senior gender analyst in one of the policy institutes there. And her book, if anyone is working on gender and terrorism, it's a must read because they're first-hand accounts from all these women. And the thing that she's really done is she's actually gone beyond Western countries. So she's included Tunisia, she's included Malaysia, she's included Indonesia, Nigeria, Sudan. So a lot of the problems that Morvini, is talking about, they actually span the globe rather than just focusing on, say, FTFs from UK or Germany or Denmark. So it's very, very groundbreaking in that sense.
Thank you. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Mohammed, you usually have some questions to throw out. Mr. Omar.
Hi, Stuart. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Not at this moment. I've just joined you late.
Aha, okay, no problem. Anybody else from the floor?
Such an interesting topic.
It really is. Okay, well, you've got off lightly there, Ms. Gurpreet. If anybody does have any questions, please pop them into the chat box. Again, thank you so much, Ms. Gurpreet. We will move on with our final intern presentation. Closing us out tonight is Miss Janet, all the way from Kenya. Miss Janet is the Resident Research Fellow for Diplomacy and Foreign Policy at the Global Centre for Policy and Strategy. She has previous experience in research and teaching at Daystar University and Kenya Methodist University. Her particular areas of expertise include international development, regional integration, bilateral relations, multilateral relations, and diplomatic strategy. Janet is currently a PhD candidate at the United States International University, Africa. She holds a master's degree in development studies and a bachelor's degree in sociology and political science from the University of Nairobi. Now, she is an accomplished researcher. Some of her latest push works include Reorientating Kenya, United States Free Trade Agreement negotiations outcomes to Kenya's economic goals, bolstering Kenya-Tanzania relations in the Samia Suluhu Hassan presidency, you put these in here to confuse me. Sino-Russo Space Alliance implications on geopolitical realignments, US foreign policy and Kenya's space agency, internal dynamics affecting Kenya's diplomatic leverage in the Kenya-Somalia maritime boundary dispute, and finally, the role of networks in determining usage of community currencies in Kenya. So very decorated young lady. I'm looking forward to passing her over to introduce her topic, and good luck, and off you go.
Hello, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm having a lot of network challenges today.
Yeah, we can hear you and we can see your
loud and clear
screen as well.
Okay, thank you. So as I've been introduced, I'm Janet Kiguru from Kenya. I think the bar has been set too high by my colleagues, but I hope to also contribute to this debate. So my paper is on external geopolitical interests as enablers of global terrorism in East and Central Africa. I looked at this region because I come from East Africa, Kenya, and I thought of doing a topic that is close to home because the impact is also felt close to home. So like the photo on my screen is on one of the latest attacks that we had in Kenya at a hotel in Dusit, where you find there were more than people from more than 10 nationalities that were affected by this terror attack. So you find that the ongoing issues of terrorism in the region have been diffusing. Initially, Somalia was the only source of instability and terrorism in the region. However, you find as with time, Kenya has now become a major exporter of terrorism and financing of terrorism. This year, Mozambique has had a lot of cases on terrorism in the Cabo Delgado region, where you find even Total had to flee and leave the gas resources that they were exploring in the region. Now we are also seeing that Ethiopia is now destabilized in the moment, and we also, in my paper, I will also be looking at how are all these issues contributing and why is terrorism becoming a greater issue in this day and age when we are saying that we are having so many counterterrorism efforts. So I begin by looking at by how we are countering terrorism in the East African region. It's 20 years since the Great War on Terror, and we cannot see much results on it. So we find that, yes, for example, the Al-Shabaab leaders at one point or another have been killed through airstrikes by the US. But at the end of the day, we find that Al-Shabaab, the Islamic State, is still regrouping in Somalia, and Somalia has been the biggest threat to the region. So we find, is it that we're doing something wrong? At every other time, we see the UN Security Council giving resolutions on the Islamic State, on Al-Shabaab and other terror groups within Africa, but the problem is still there. For me, I argue that mainly, we are focused on blaming the victims, looking at how unstable governments are breeding terrorism, but we're failing to look at the bigger picture. There's the source of terrorism. So if you look at the major counter-terrorism strategies that have been there, one is to prevent or stop people from becoming terrorists, then to pursue or to stop terrorist attacks, to protect and strengthen protection against terrorist attacks, then to prepare or mitigate the impact of a terrorist attack. The last three are more or less reactive. How about we focus on preventing? And here I have a disclaimer that it is not that I'm saying that we should not look at the internal factors within these East African states and what is contributing to terrorism within these states, but also maybe we need to start nipping terror from the source. And you will find that before 1980, these East African states actually did not have a problem of terrorism. However, we are seeing over time, terrorism is diffusing even at a much faster rate than we can actually counter the terror effects. So you find that, for example, in the UNSC report, 2021 UNSC report, they attributed the increasing terror activities in the region, especially sub-Saharan Africa, to unstable governments, to poverty, weak governance, communal ties, gender inequality, youth unemployment, and illicit activities. However, my argument in this paper is that there are bigger underlying issues. For example, where are these terror groups getting their arms from? Who is financing them? How are these illicit activities and transnational crimes happening? Because they're not localized within Africa. So there's a bigger dynamic where you find the enablers of terrorism are also they are also the same actors who are claiming to fight or acting against counterterrorism measures. So you find that even when we are attending all these symposiums and all these big events on counterterrorism, they just want mainly to sell their weapons and know where will the next threat be. But it is not that the world order that we have right now is not helping us get to the root of this problem. So I look at one, what is the source of violent jihadi in the region? Where is violent jihadi permitting in the region? And who is following global terrorism? So first, I look at the bees, the pollen, and the pollination of radical violent jihadi in the region. For me, I look, the literature has been well spanned out for this one, where you're finding that the pollination of mainly coming from the Middle East. You find a lot of countries in the Middle East, especially Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, Egypt, have actually been highlighted as having funded or even having been involved in direct terror activities. And how are they doing this? One is by giving out a lot of scholarships. You find that that these scholarships are directed towards Islamic studies, where you find sometimes you cannot control what these people go out there and learn. So for example, in Kenya, the first clerics who came back from Saudi Arabia in the 1980s are the ones who came back with the Wahhabism and the Salafism that now went on to become the radical extremism within the Kenyan coast. They're the same people who went out and studied, the same clerics who went out and studied at the same time from Somalia. They went to Saudi Arabia and Iran and came back being very radical. So the education system is also not helping because the madrasa system in Kenya is not regulated. Some of these countries are directly funding the madrasa activities without the government's knowledge, and even sometimes, even with the government knowing, they cannot be able to curtail some of these activities because they have been disguised as charitable activities. They are also in our refugee camps, especially in the Dadaab refugee camp, and you find what they are spreading there is state-sanctioned hate. So how do we fight this state-sanctioned hate? Yet most of these countries are developing countries that are eager to get this aid. So we need to look at what forms of aid are coming to Africa. It might be a form of soft power, but the end goal might be more harmful than what it is meant to do in the first place. So I looked at a few terror group leaders who have been operating in the region and the countries where they have had their influence. So for example, the current group in Mozambique, their leaders mainly got their influence from Saudi Arabia, Kenya, and Somalia. But you find both Kenya and Somalia got their influence of the radical extremism from Saudi Arabia. Again, Jamil Muluku, who is now who is leading the Islamic State in the Democratic Republic of Congo, has had a lot of influence. He studied in Saudi Arabia. He got military training in Pakistan and also had military training from a group in Morocco. Previously, he was operating in Uganda. So you find this is a regional and also transnational network spanning even beyond Africa. And this is what we need to be napping. Abu Drogo, for example, who has been a great contributor to the movement in Mozambique, but was gunned down by the Kenyan government, equally was influenced through Islamic teachings when he went to study in Saudi Arabia. So you find that this has been a recurring event where current leaders and even past leaders of these terror groups were influenced in some of these countries, yet the governments cannot be able to stop this movement. So other than that, I look at why are jihadi activities permitting to regions that were previously not part of the former Islamic Caliphate. So you find, for example, the Democratic Republic of Congo has a very little population of Muslims, but now they have one of the biggest Islamic State caliphates in Africa. The same thing has happened to Mozambique. Mozambique was not part of the Islamic State Caliphate. So you find if you trace how the Islamist groups are moving, they're following where the resources are. And Africa is one of the last frontiers of natural resources. You find that Democratic Republic of Congo is one of the wealthiest in terms of gold, cobalt, timber, the coltan, the lithium, and some of these resources are going to be so influential in the future because they are the ones that are going to lead the decarbonization agenda within the climate change discourse. So you find that some of these groups are actually tracing or moving to where they can exploit these resources so that they can be able to continue funding their terror activities. You find that, for example, the Allied Defense Forces and Al-Shabaab have both camped in Democratic Republic of Congo. They are pursuing the cobalt, coltan, and gold. But you ask yourselves, where are they selling this cobalt and gold? Some of these networks have been linked to networks in Nairobi, in Kampala, and some of these, and beyond that, they are eventually exported out of Africa. So this is something else maybe we need to dismantle before we come back and start saying that, yes, we are killing youths or because they have been radicalized. That is not the solution. The solution lies in nipping these terror activities that enable terrorism to continue prospering. You find in my case study, I look at beyond DRC. For example, Al-Shabaab has thrived on piracy, on illegal smuggling of weapons to Yemen, and also the illicit tuna fishing. And some of these countries are well known. Iran and China are fishing in Somali's water. They're not interested in stabilization of Somalia. So you find that anytime where there are resources and where there are a lot of natural resources and a weak government, a lot of terror groups are moving into those regions to exploit those resources. I also looked at how the rot in the military industries, especially with a focus on Somalia. The war in Somalia has been almost 30 years down the line, yet there is no solution to it, and more terror groups are coming in. We now have almost more than 10 terror groups. The well-known are the Islamic State and Al-Shabaab, but we have a lot of militias running around in Somalia. Where are they getting their weapons? Some of these weapons are very sophisticated. They have now acquired even drones that they can even use to now shoot down aeroplanes. They are making very serious attacks. For example, the Garissa attack in Kenya left 140 students dead. So you can find that the ammunition that they are getting and the type of attacks that are going on keep increasing in intensity. The most recent, for example, the Dusit that I highlighted, they were using 56-1 machine guns. So where did they get those weapons? You find that in a trace by the Global Institute of Transnational Crimes, they have tried to highlight that these weapons are either being illicitly sold in the market, or they are actually given to Al-Shabaab by some of these countries, either because they have done other illicit activities that are not well known to the government. For example, there was a UN attack. There was an attack on the UN compound in Somalia last year, and the mortar that was recovered was from North Korea. North Korea has not been on any peacekeeping mission in Somalia. So certainly somebody sold the Al-Shabaab those mortars. So you find that some countries, for example, like the United Arab Emirates or even Kenya, can argue that their weapons are in the wrong hands or with the Al-Shabaab, maybe because they were taken up maybe during the peacekeeping or during the stabilization process. However, we find that there are weapons that have been manufactured, especially by China, whose the end user is supposed to be Iran, but somehow they find themselves in Somalia, meaning that some of these state stockpiles are being deliberately given to terrorists to continue perpetrating their terror activities, either to reward them or even to encourage them to go and pursue other terror activities. So for example, last year in 2020, when General Soleimani was killed, you find that the Al-Shabaab perpetrated a terror attack on a US camp on Lamu that borders Somalia. And the weapons that were received were from Iran. So this is deliberate. Either they were given deliberately to go and attack the US camp, or it was a reward for what they had done previously. So there's a lot of state stockpiles, weapons that should not even be within Africa, whose end users are not within Africa, that are circulating in Somalia. And the question is, why is there this opaqueness in the defense industry, and who is supporting it? Lastly, I look at how the foreign policy agendas, within competing nation states are also fueling jihadism and terrorism in Africa. So for example, we see that the fall of Gaddafi has actually made the entire northern Sahel region almost ungovernable, because the weapons that belonged to the Libyan army found themselves way down to the Niger, Mali, Sudan region. So now we have another problem, that Ethiopia is now the new spot of instability. And what we are seeing is that all these big countries have now want to create another proxy war. They are weakening some Ethiopia, one of the countries that has been key in counterterrorism efforts. So we are seeing on one side, the Ethiopian government is getting support from China, Turkey, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and all these other countries, including Azerbaijan. On the other side, we find that the TPLF, that's the Tigray People Liberation Front, is getting support from Egypt, Sudan, and other countries. In fact, the Ethiopian government is saying that some fighters have come all the way from Egypt to come and fight in the war. When states are weakened, as we have seen with Libya, it is a high likelihood that terror activities will become entrenched. There is a big flow of weapons, some of which is illicit and cannot even be accounted for. So when this all ends, whether the Tigray Liberation Front will win or even the government, you will not expect the Ethiopian state to be the same. It was the only state in the region that did not have an Islamic state province within them. But now you find that they have been so destabilized that the US has started issuing terror warnings within the Addis Ababa. And we also actually saw that in July 2021, Al-Shabaab came and attacked an Ethiopian National Defense camp outpost just near Somalia. So technically, Ethiopia will not be the same in counterterrorism efforts. Yet Ethiopia is the one that is providing the biggest contingent to Somalia in the stabilization process. So sometimes when we intervene in these countries, attempting to intervene in the political affairs, we are actually making it possible for these terrorist groups to come in and mess up these countries and create more terror attacks within the region. So the conclusion is that we need to locate counterterrorism efforts from the source. The UN resolutions without actions defeat the entire purpose. So terrorists are adapting faster than governments. They are being able to get more weapons and more sophisticated weapons actually than some of these developing countries. And therefore we cannot allow these states alone to be left to manage counterterrorism efforts. Maybe perhaps we need bigger intergovernmental international organizations to actually help and trace where these illicit activities are, who to speak even states. Therefore, we need more maritime surveillance because, for example, we are seeing that the Western Indian Ocean has become the main hub of illicit transport of weapons from the Middle East into Somalia and then to the rest of Africa. These are routes that need to be mitigated, probably even beyond the current EU naval forces that we are having in the region, because it is a bigger issue than it seems. We also need to reduce the opaqueness of these defense industries. We need to find laws and how to sanction defense industries that are still selling weapons to terror groups. Also, we need to sanction companies that are profiteering from conflict. And these sanctions can even be by the people themselves. Right now, we have embraced the cancel culture. And if you know you're using a phone whose mineral resources have been gotten from a war zone or even a terror through means that could be enabling terrorism, maybe it takes more for the general population now to start saying we are going to boycott certain companies if they are enablers of terrorism. Thank you.
Wow, what a powerful and thought-provoking presentation to close out the webinar this evening. That was absolutely fantastic, Miss Janet. Thank you so much. It's interesting that you ended there on, you kind of took, if that presentation was to go on, you're almost kind of going into the crime-terror link or the crime-terror nexus there and targeting sort of the drug pushers and the weapons trafficking, the crime side of it. As a strategy to counter this. So yeah, it was a really nice way to finish. Anyway, does anybody have any questions from the floor for Miss Janet? Anyone? Wow, I'm shocked.
Oh, Mohammed raised his hand.
Oh, I can't see. Sorry, I missed that. I was just scrolling through all the names. But yeah, go ahead, Mr. Mohammed.
Apologies, it's just my voice is gone now. Great presentation, Janet. Very good, and addressing the challenges of counter-terrorism in Africa. Just in your introduction, I just wanted to, just the key points in terms of corruption. Unless you're able to stop corruption in Africa, the rest, in terms of preventative measures, the work. How do you see in terms of combating corruption? Because in terms of a lot of these governments, combating counterterrorism, when you say it's in Kenya and other countries, when went into Somalia, until today, there's still problems, and even problems have just cropped up in Ethiopia, Mozambique, and Congo. I mean, those counterterrorism strategies have not yet to be seen. Transparency is the problem. And when countries don't provide the counterterrorism strategies, and there are issues, and also corruption is another. One question is, how do you think governments can be able to combat corruption in terms of to combat terrorism in those countries? The second question I have, it is in relation to oppositions, because political issues as well. There have been where democracy has been seen as the source for these individuals to be able to be radicalized, manipulated. And again, of course, we know a lot of young people, unemployment, or not benefiting from this, the source of oil and gas. So the unemployment has been seen as the rise in employment, the standard of living as well, which is, when you look at it, the root cause of radicalization is usually people are being able to be manipulated in terms of financing. Now, unless you're able to solve, preventative measures, because there's have not yet to be seen where there are rehabilitation programs in those countries. And they're always to be looking at how hard power, autocratic governments, they think that's worked, but they're only pushing these terrorists in other regions. And there's some example in Tanzania had problems and they pushed these individuals to Mozambique, and now it's the biggest problem because of hard power. But there's no soft power looking at preventative measures. Maybe it's the air. How do you see that? Should be maybe a question that you need to address. That's for me.
I see, like, there's another question. Do I respond to that first?
In terms of corruption.
Yes, so certainly I agree. There's a lot of corruption and there's a lot of push factors. For example, the youth unemployment that is enabling or is pushing youth into these jihadi groups. But the question is, or even what I would say is that Africa's capacity, or even the global capacity to deal with some of these push factors, has been an ongoing discourse in development. Unemployment has been there for a very long time, and it has actually been increasing, yes, but it is not something that we can actually say that if you handle this employment, your people will not get into jihadi groups. So you find that even the people who went into Somalia, Kenyans who went into Somalia, they did not get those many finances that they were being told. They were being told that they are going to get 100,000 Kenya shillings to fight for Al-Shabaab. So many of them started coming back home. The government even started programs, for example, to buy them motorbikes to de-radicalize them. But by the time they were coming, even the communities themselves did not want these people to be reintegrated. So you find that there are a lot of issues that are pushing the youth into this. For example, yes, the corruption, the porous borders, the illicit financial transfers. But it is much easier to ensure that in the first place, these people do not get radicalized. It is better to stop the radicalization before it happens. And this is why I think it is important for us to nip those sources where radicalization is coming from. It's coming in mainly from the mosques. The mosques have spotters who are positioned in different counties in different regions where they look for vulnerable youths to radicalize. So I feel like this should be the first point of contact. If you look, for example, one of the groups that I had shared is a group that is yet to commit any jihadi activity, but it is increasingly getting affiliated with Al-Shabaab. The leaders were sponsored to go and study in Saudi Arabia. When they came back, they have sponsored the construction of 2 mosques in Nakuru. They have also sponsored the education of so many youths in the region. They have actually removed the moderate imams and replaced them with the very radical imams. So it is a matter of time before we start seeing terror attacks in Nakuru. And Nakuru is in the middle of Kenya, somewhere in the interior. It's not in the coastal region or even in the capital city, but it is one of the big cities. So yes, there are all these push factors, but if you look at the source, where are these people being able to spot these vulnerable youth? It's because they have been allowed to, or because they are taking advantage of these vulnerabilities. Do we have a way that we can actually sponsor these youths to actually study in Kenyan Technical Institute and actually pay for them where they will not get radicalized into such radical extremist beliefs? So nonetheless, corruption it is still going to be there. Corruption is there in Europe, in every other country. We cannot say that simply by ending corruption, we will stop the spread of terror. So I believe that we also need to first focus on where these terror activities, or who is sponsoring them and who is funding these activities. Because even the corruption, the money that is coming, that is funding this or allowing these terror groups to thrive is not coming from within Africa. The corruption is beginning from the international financial system, where we're seeing there are some banks that have, or even bank accounts internationally, that have been flagged supporting terror activities. So maybe we need to look at how this entire discourse is just not from within the internal factors in Kenya, Somalia, DRC, or even within the region.
Great answer.
Yeah, thank you, Janet. Very good.
Okay, we have just one more question we've got time for. I think I want to say this right. Is it May Hossan?
Yeah, of course. Good evening.
Good evening. Go ahead.
Okay, very great presentation. My question is, when we speak about counterterrorism in the African countries, so shall we forget these other countries in the archipelago, like Mauritian, Jigugosha, all those islands who can be a liability for transiting weapons in secret to these countries, which can proliferate mass destruction?
Pardon? I missed you. You were breaking, sorry.
Yeah, Mir, don't talk so fast. Hold the microphone away from your mouth a little bit.
Yeah, it's fine now?
Go ahead.
Yeah, when we speak counterterrorism in the African countries, so we have the tendency to look to the big ones, like clearly state, Afghanistan, Iran. All those countries are big countries, big nations. So the simple way for which we can stop this proliferation and also can cause harm to those people who are dealing with this. So by stopping their transition method, because the placement is very important. For example, the archipelago, like consisting in the Indian Ocean of Mauritius, Jigogosha, all those islets who can be a good liability of transition of arms embargo to these African countries. Are they a problem causing to the African countries?
Certainly, I would say so. If you look at how the contagion of terror within the East African community, initially the spread of Islam in Africa came from Oman. So you find we have Oman speakers in, Swahili speakers in Oman. Then you find that it has followed a trail of all these small islands and all these actors, for example, from Somali, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique. They all speak Swahili. They can understand each other somehow because of the commonality in culture and also religion. So you find that this thread of Swahili goes all the way to Comoros and other islands in Zanzibar and other regions. So you find that the first attacks in Mozambique actually came from the sea. So I would actually say that it is very possible that there are sleeper cells or even massive radicalism that is happening in these islands that also needs to be looked into. So you find, for example, the Mozambique group has actually been benefiting a lot from the sale of timber and rubies that they use to transport through maritime routes. And certainly it has become evident that some of these islands, even in that region, are being used as transshipment for transshipment purposes. So you find, for example, Iran will not ship weapons directly to Yemen. So they will first transship them through Somalia, and then those are the ones that will take them to Yemen. So there's all these interlocutors or all these islands within the Western Indian Ocean that you cannot, they have not been captured in this specific case study, but you cannot say that certainly they're not part of this larger network of radicalization and the spread of the contagion, terror contagion in the East African region. I hope that answered your question.
Excellent answer. Thank you. And thank you for the question. That was our final intern tonight, closing us out. Miss Janet, thank you so much. That was a fantastic way to end the webinar. Just lastly, a thank you to all 5 of our interns for joining us tonight to present on their papers, and thank you for everyone else who's joined us for this weekend's webinar yesterday and today. I will now pass you back over to Todd to close us out, and thank you so much.
Mr. Stuart Ripon-Ness, fantastic job moderating today. I just want to say great presentations by all of our interns. Today was about you. Great job.